The UK government last week launched an inquiry into corporate governance at UK PLCs. Today, here with me to discuss is Janet Williamson, Senior Policy Officer at the TUC. How do you get the companies in the UK that have accepted workers onto the board? Was it a tough process to get the boards accepting of workers and in turn to have workers stand up and say, I actually want to be on the board of the company? Do you see that as a struggle?
Well, at the moment, there are very few UK companies that do have workers on the boards. I don't know that it has necessarily been in a struggle in those companies. Okay. I mean, for example, First Group, it's a very successful transport company, has had one worker, I believe, on the board since the company's inception. It's just the way it was set up. I don't believe there have been sort of problems with that. Indeed, the company is very positive about having a worker representative on the board and, has described it as being invaluable. It seems to work extremely well. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be resistance from some companies if the measure were to be made mandatory, which is something that we do support. We believe it should be brought in by law in order to, bring around what we see as a necessary sea change in corporate governance and a transformation in the sort of culture and priorities of the boardroom.
So you think a government initiative should be in law rather than kind of a comply or explain type situation?
Well, I mean, we'd welcome any change from the status quo. We'd welcome anything that did bring workers into the boardroom. My concern about a comply or explain mechanism for this measure, which I think will be resisted by some companies, is that it just wouldn't then happen, and that we'd have too many companies explaining and not complying. I think comply and explain can work. We do not argue that every single good practice measure should be embodied in law rather than in codes. But I believe that codes work and comply and explain, type mechanisms work best where there's generally a consensus for the measure, but there may be different ways of putting it into practice. There may be different speeds at which a measure would be put into practice for different companies. There's different circumstances where variation is genuinely justified. In those scenarios, I think comply and explain can work quite well, and it can gradually bring about change in a way that sometimes the law can be a blunt instrument. But I don't think this measure fits well with that kind of enforcement mechanism. I think where worker representation on boards is extremely common in continental Europe, where it works extremely well. And I think if it was introduced here, we would quickly see it falling into place and becoming a valued and accepted part of how boards operate, just as it is in the majority of countries in continental Europe. And so my fear about a comply and explain approach is that it wouldn't really happen. It would be very, very slow, and you wouldn't get the benefits that would then show the virtues of the measure coming through in the same way.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Janet.
Thank you.